Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. Today's episode is presented by Golf Dojo. Your space, your time, your game. Bring your game to Golf Dojo, Western New York's best indoor golf experience. Visit mygolfdojo.com. My name is Patrick Moran, and thank you very much, as always, for everyone out there watching, listening, following, subscribing. I do appreciate y'all very much. Tomorrow, we're going to get into some Buffalo Bills camp stuff, some previews of sorts. We'll put a recap, a spin on some of what might have happened in regards to the Buffalo Sabres here on Monday. Later this week, on Friday, I'm going to be with Channel 4 Sports' newest sports reporter and anchor, Carl Jones. Is going to be with me for a show live from Imperial Pizza. As for today, we are starting a big week on this podcast, and of course, a big week possibly for the Buffalo Sabres, which means I'm going to bring in my guy right now, Chad DeDominicis from Expected Buffalo, one of my good buddies and a recurring guest on the show through the years. What's going on, Chad? How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Kind of, getting a little bit of relaxation time in this weekend, a little bit of fun, so to speak, before we get going here with hockey. I know you, we were talking for a few minutes before we rolled the camera here. You went to Ellicottville up for the weekend, huh?
Yeah, it was supposed to be. So I went with, I think there was 13 of us ended up going for a friend's bachelor party. A nice relaxing one, not one of those ones where like everyone goes to like Miami Beach now or something crazy. Just to Ellicottville. We were supposed to do 2 days of golfing. We got in a beautiful 18 holes on Friday, but rained out on Saturday. So that turned into beer games all day. But it got nice at night. So we were able to go out and, hit the strip in Ellicottville. So yeah, good time. Nice relaxing time, 2 days. That's cool. Then back today and back to the grind because it's busy week. It's the last busy week in the hockey calendar, I guess you could say.
I was wondering if you plan, because I know you were in Ellicottville this weekend, and obviously the draft is going on this weekend. And like I said, hockey, most people are going to be listening or watching this sometime probably Monday morning, maybe early Monday afternoon. Things are going to be in the full swing. I was kind of wondering if you strategically place a little bit of a getaway on purpose the weekend going into this, but it's your buddy's bachelor party. So I'm sure he didn't know ahead of time when he was planning this about the draft and stuff. No,
usually not. Usually the getaways, things like that are in May or in the middle of August. So I had my phone on me for a lot of it. I frustratedly, I think after they picked 14, kind of checked out on Friday, and then Saturday morning when the draft started, there was a lot going on. So that was a little bit. I saw their second round pick, and then obviously they made the one trade, and then after that I was kind of and I just again checked out. But I'm back. I'm full in now. I'm excited. For the week.
I went to before we dive into some Sabres and hockey talk here. So this weekend in Buffalo, downtown Buffalo, there was a Nickel City Comic-Con, and I've never been to one of those before. I don't know. Have you ever been to one of those big Comic-Cons where they got a bunch of C and D list celebrities that appear and stuff like that? It was an eye opener, man. I'll tell you what, dude, if you want to do some legitimate, serious, nothing else but just people watching, this is the place to be. I would imagine it's like sports fanatics, but instead of sports, it's Marvel and it's cartoons and it's anime and stuff like that. Just these fanatics. So many people were dressed up, so much cosplaying going on. It was pretty wild. Pretty cool, though. I mean, there were a ton of really cool merch tables up there. And then, like I said, a couple rows of celebrities that you hear of, and then a lot of them kind of fade away and you forget about them till you hear their names. There were a couple. You are or at least you were a wrestling fan, if I remember correct.
I used to be, and then I got it WrestleMania this year. I got into for the couple days. I got into it the 2 days. It was cool. It dragged me back in. I think I watched the Raw after WrestleMania because got to see what happens, and then I've tried it again. So
there were some good oldies but goodies there. Rikishi was there.
Oh, nice.
I met Sergeant Slaughter. He was there.
Yes, I saw a friend when I was in Elgaville showed me a picture with one of their friends with Sergeant Slaughter. Yep.
Yeah, he was really cool, man. Really personable guy. Yeah, he was there. Kane was there. Probably the whole biggest line of anyone I saw at these things was actually for Kane. Mick Foley was
Okay.
there. I'm trying to think. There might have been a couple other wrestlers, but it was pretty cool, man. There were some of the casts from American Pie. Some of them were there. Shannon Elizabeth was there, which was the highlight of the day for me. She still looks gorgeous. I mean, oh my God, she still is a knockout, and she was really, really cool. Tara Reid was there.
Okay. Yep.
She's seen some. She's been through a lot of rough times. I'll never sit there and publicly, make fun of anything. But yeah, she was there. The Dukes of Hazzard people were there, which probably there were a lot of Dukes of Hazzard fans. Catherine Bach. I mean, God, I was obsessed with her in the early 80s. 40 some years later. I think she's 70 years old. Looked it up today. But anyway, it was really fun. $55 just to walk in the door, though. That was kind of wild, but it was fun, man. It was fun. All right, let me ask you this too. This is the time of year now for you. All right. So you got the season. Obviously, you're covering the team during the season. I know that's a grind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you get a little bit of downtime. Now you're obviously jumping back into the grind right now. Free agency, trades, everything pretty much at this point now is on the table for the Sabres in around the league. Do you get more excited this time of year? Like, what is your favorite time of year? Is somebody, whether it's the Sabres or just as a hockey person, who covers hockey, is this among like the most favorite time of the year for you right now?
Yeah, this time and around trade deadline time. I mean, I can't comment on from a covering the team perspective on the playoffs part yet because I just haven't been able to do that. But yeah, I mean, this is. I don't want to say like this. Anything could happen. Like it could, but even still, like there's realistic, things you can hope for. There's things you can talk about. There's rumors that you hear and then you kind of chase around like, oh man, that'd be really cool. And then you find out 25 minutes later that wasn't really true. And you're like, oh, that's a bummer. But then
Right.
then you go to the next one. So yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's exciting. Everybody's excited. Really, I mean, it feels like Christmas Eve in a sense because the night before free agency, everyone kind of goes to sleep dreaming of things. And then your hopes of the guys you want them to go after and stuff like that. So yeah, it's fun, exciting. It really gets people interested this time of the year. And then, it's also the time of the year too, where you get a lot of anxiety and down feelings and thoughts because of this team, what they've done. So it's hard to manage both ends of the spectrum for sure, but it's fun.
I would imagine Christmas is a little bit richer in some other cities than maybe Buffalo. Like the expectations of what gifts you have under the Christmas tree might be a little bit different in, say, Tampa Bay or Pittsburgh or New York than it is here in Buffalo. By the way, I also want to make sure that Chad gets some props here too. Not that you're out there seeking it, but you did call a little more than a week ago. You were reporting on Twitter that you heard through sources that Jeff Skinner was going to get bought out. I mean, there were growing rumblings at the time, but nothing got set. And you reported, you were the first one actually to report last week that you heard via multiple sources that barring an unforeseen trade, that Jeff Skinner was going to get bought out. Let's start there. Right now, maybe not such a surprise to you. We're literally now into July, but maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks ago, would you have thought at the time that this is ultimately, I mean, there were rumblings of it going on for a while now, but to actually see this happen, Jeff Skinner gets bought out. He's going to be paying for the next 6 years, the remaining 3 years of his contract, get bought out by the Sabres, which they announced over the weekend. What's your level of surprise right now? And to say maybe, like I said, a month or so ago, this would have been more surprising to you?
Yeah. Because Adams and the Sabres overall are not a team that likes to do buyouts.
Right.
And so, I mean, I never really put it on the table because I just didn't think financially is what they wanted to do. So yeah, I mean, I always thought they were going to try to see if they can find a trade, which just wasn't in the cards. He had no interest of moving his no move clause. There were teams that tried, that called, they had offers on the table, and he wasn't about it. He wasn't willing to move. Basically said, I'd rather just go to free agency, and I get it. He loses. He gets 2/3 2/3 of his remaining contract. So he gets 14.6 of the $22 million remaining. And then, his thought probably is I'll go to a team that could be in the playoffs because he's played over 1,000 games and has not played one playoff game. So I'm sure he wants to do that, and rightfully so. He'll sign on with a team that is going to be a playoff team and low money deal and make some money back. I mean, he can even do, $1 million for a year or $1 million for 3 years. Kind of basically what Matt Duchene did last year with the Dallas Stars. 1 year,
Yeah.
$3.1 million, and now he's going to cash in this year as a UFA. I think he's going to go back to Dallas, but still, he's going to get a bigger contract than what he got last year. So I think Skinner can try to go along the same lines there and then get into the playoffs and then try to cash in, at 33, because those guys still get paid. It's older, but if he proves he still has game left, and I think he does. I think in the right role, he can still produce for a team. He's still one of the better 5-on-5 scorers in the league. So he'll find a spot, and we'll see where that goes for him.
For people who might not be aware, and you kind of explained it somewhat, but if you could elaborate a little more, why do you think Jeff Skinner would not waive his no trade clause? Now, obviously, we don't know specifically the teams that were maybe attempting to trade for him. So it's kind of hard to really give too much reasoning not knowing that information. But the fact that he's still going to get paid by the Sabres, even though he's been bought out, he's still going to see that money. And like you said, now he could be a free agent and kind of pick his team. But do you think is part of the reason why he would not waive a no trade for that reason, so he still get his money and then essentially be a free agent? Or these teams that maybe were interested in him weren't teams that he wanted to go play for? Like what are the reasons why he would not waive his no trade clause? Because it would seem, especially if he's getting his money, regardless, any situation would be better for winning at least than Buffalo right now.
Yeah, I think it's a few things. The teams that I'm aware of that, virtually at this point I can't share with anybody, but the teams that I'm aware of that called and were interested, they're not teams I would say are ones you would consider as definite playoff teams. I think that's part of it. But I think even beyond that, I don't think it really would have mattered who called. He just wanted to go to free agency, and it's getting control of your situation. You can see what's out there. You can see who's interested in you, and you can pick what destination you feel is best, who you want to go play with. You have multiple options. They're all out there. Because all those teams that are really good, playoff teams or high-end teams, they don't have the cap space to take on $4.5 million. And that's what, if the Sabres retained half, that's what they would have had to take, $4.5 million for the next 3 years. They just don't have the cap space or the willingness to do that because their cap space is so tight, and they don't want to waste $4.5 million on a gamble, because really that's what he is at this point. So yeah, he goes into the open market. I don't think it's going to take long for him to find somebody. It might even be early tomorrow. He has a new team already. It would not surprise me. I'm sure his agent's been out there. This is, for over a week now, we've heard about this probably happening. And then when I confirmed it last week, so the agent's been out there doing work. So I'm sure he'll have something lined up and he'll be on his way. But it was all about control, and he's earned that. He put that into his contract. He negotiated it in. And I have no issue with that, especially where he is at this point in his career. And I think he was very open. His agent were very open with the Sabres in the beginning. And I think the Sabres were open with him too, that they were that they felt this was best for both to go their separate ways, where the Sabres were going, what they wanted to be, and where he was at this point in his career. So I think it was an open dialogue, an open conversation. And this is where it is. He wanted control. The Sabres wanted to move on, and both at the end of the day get what they want.
Let's play the speculation game a little bit, or a couple of destinations where you could see Skinner winding up, with the premise that he's probably going to win the Stanley Cup somewhere in the next 2 or 3 years. If he don't do it, Casey Middlestad's doing it. He goes to Colorado, you pretty much can lock that cup up right now. But in all seriousness, what are a couple destinations where you think he could potentially go to and still be a good fit?
Yeah, I think Toronto should be on the board, because when he came to Buffalo, Buffalo and Toronto were the two teams he would wait for. So I think they're out there if they have the cap space to do it. But again, if he's going to take a low contract, maybe he does. So I think Toronto has to be in there. And then beyond that, I don't know. Could the Rangers do it? Maybe if they can move Jacob Trouba and they find some cap space, that's a possibility. you really just, I mean, you can open a book and pull up teams in the playoffs last year, and I think it could be any of them. They can fit it in. Nashville's a team I think could be really interesting for that. They've done that before, kind of that reclamation project thing. Even Dallas is another team that likes to do that. So I think those are all options out there. It's tough to say. If he wants to stay close to home, and that's important to him, which it still might be, then I think you would put Toronto to the top of the list, or at least teams in this area. But if he's all about winning, that puts everybody in there. I mean, if you want a dark horse team, if he's gonna go low money, especially if Vegas is gonna lose Marchessault and they're gonna lose Chandler Stevenson, as it looks right now, maybe they reunite him with old friend Jack Eichel out there in Vegas. That is, I think, a possibility if they can find cap space too.
How did it get to this? Like, how did it come to this, to the point where they're buying out a guy who's scored at least 33 goals 3 times, on a team that at times is, at least last year anyway, not 2 years ago, but last year struggled to find the net. There's a school of thought that, I don't want to say his play's fallen off a cliff, but maybe it's he's in decline now. He didn't look the same after coming back from an injury last year. It's just, I don't know, man. It's not surprising now, but just, even just a year ago, man, if you told me that they're going to be buying out Jeff Skinner, I would be surprised. How did it get to this right now? It's tough to figure out.
I think the team changed where they want to go. And they have a new head coach, obviously, that is different. And I don't think that Lindy or Skinner would have butted heads if he would have ended up staying. I don't think that's it at all. I think that they felt, and perhaps rightfully so, that he's no longer a player that can handle top 6 minutes on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he goes to a team where he's like more of a middle 6 winger, and then he finds some space there and less time, and they can shelter him and play him differently. I think they wanted to replace him in their top 6, and they're probably going to do that tomorrow over the next few days with somebody else. And then they just didn't think he was a fit with his defensive game in the bottom 6. I think they want their bottom 6 to be defensively responsible now, more of a matchup team in certain instances, and play maybe a heavier game, more of a forechecking game, because that's been one of the criticisms on them for 2 years now. Is we know what they're a fast team. They get out, they can run, they can go in transition, but they don't have the second pitch. If a team shuts that down, under Granato, and that can be part coaching too, is that he didn't know how to deal with that. He had some issues with in-game management. Or even making, changes within a game. So that could be part of it. But they didn't have the players that could play a forechecking game and a grinded out game. And I think they're looking for that. And I mean, if anything, Malenstyn is a sure sign if that's some of the direction they want their bottom 6 to head. And he just didn't fit that. And it's good on them to realize that and not just try to, shove a square peg in a round hole. So good for them to realize it and act upon it. And try to put the best roster they are capable of, on the ice.
How do you think Jeff Skinner ultimately is remembered by Sabres fans down the road? Like you go on the Buffalo Bills side, and Stefan Diggs, production wise, was incredible for the Bills for 4 years. Stefan Diggs also had some moments off the field. I'm not even going to say reports. It's just flat out true. Stefan Diggs wanted out of Buffalo and got traded. He didn't publicly demand a trade, but behind the scenes, he wanted to be traded. And ultimately, he did get traded. And the Bills ate a lot of cap money to get rid of him. Sabres side, Jeff Skinner's gone now. He gets bought out. But, Jeff Skinner was never a problem in the locker room.
No, the off-ice thing was not there. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. The off-ice thing isn't there for him. No.
Yeah, fun guy, funny guy. I think he was pretty well liked by fans. Obviously, maybe a lot of it is on him as well too. But kind of like maybe the poster child for the drought. A guy who's played 1,000 games and has never played in a single playoff game. So I get that too from that side from fans. But ultimately, when it's all said and done,
I honestly hate that so much.
I know. I
get it. I get why it's on him.
Sure.
But he played for 2 organizations that couldn't get out of their own way.
Sure.
Carolina and then Buffalo. And I get it. He's not the best defensive player by any means. And when playoff time comes around, that is probably important. But this is one of the best 5-on-5 scorers in the league throughout his career. In the league, that includes Ovechkin, that includes he is top 5 in that category in the league. So that says something. I put no blame on their failures on him. He did what he was asked to do, especially 2 years ago when he had that big season when they missed by a point.
Hey,
You could
35
make an
goals.
argument. Besides Thompson, I think he was the second best player in that team that year.
Mhm.
So, what else is he supposed to do? It always bothers me that like we have these conversations about, and I'm going off the rails a little bit here. I promise I'll bring it back. But I mean,
You're
we have all
good,
these
buddy.
conversations about why the team didn't succeed, and it's because Thompson didn't score enough, or Cousins had a down year, or Darlene didn't do his things, or Power didn't do what he had to do, and like it's sure, but we never really look beyond the good players on the team, and it's always what frustrates me is could they have played better at times and in certain situations? Of course, absolutely, but what's around them is what the issue is. They don't if they're not at the top of their game, the top of their peak, they don't have a chance because the depth on the team is just not there to make up for it. You can't
Yeah.
afford Thompson having a bad month because there's nobody else to step in. You can't afford Power to have a rough month and a half as a 20-year-old, and that happens as a sophomore in this league. Couldn't afford it because there's nobody behind him to step into that role. And that's what my hope was this year. They built some depth. So if somebody has a bad month or a bad few weeks, you're okay. You can survive it. Um, it's June 30th at 9/11, and they have a lot of holes, and we'll see what they do. But yeah, I just wanted to get that off my chest. That like we
No,
always
that's
go after the top guys, and I think we need to dig deeper.
I couldn't agree with you more. So obviously, you at least hope that his legacy in Buffalo will be remembered fondly, and that it
Yeah,
deserves to be remembered fondly. And you say a great point, man, and it really resonates with me. And I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening too. Not even just with the Sabres, but maybe with sports and the importance of having depth in organizations. Like say the Buffalo Bills, for an example, they hit hard by injuries last year, but they had the depth to, and their star players play like stars, but they also had the depth to be able to withstand some of these injuries or just not playing as well. And that is a great point with the Buffalo Sabres. When you lack depth, if a guy like Tage Thompson or Jeff Skinner gets hurt or they go into a funk for a while and there's not anyone else there to pick up the slack, that's how you get buried. That's how you lose 5 out of 7 games or something like that,
yeah,
and you get buried in the standings. Depth is such an important part of any organization. All right, when it comes to the draft, so the draft was Friday. I
yep,
think it was last Thursday where they announced the trade the day before. The Sabres were on the clock for the 11th pick, but they
yep,
traded back to 14
yep.
and picked up 43. Twitter kind of exploded in that moment right away. I mean, it didn't even have to wait until to see how the draft unfolded, which turns out a lot of people were pissed off. Probably were justified for it, as far as I'm concerned, at the end of the day. But what was your instant in the moment thought when the Sabres, who were scheduled to pick 11th, trade back to pick up an extra second round pick, and now they're picking 14th?
Oh, it was I smart move. You move back
Yeah.
3 picks and got a free second round pick out of it. Not only a free second round pick, but now you picked back to back at 42 and 43, which is
Mm-hmm.
great to have in your pocket. So I loved it. I mean, it for me, the second San Jose called and offered that, sure. Especially in this draft. I mean, it would depend on the draft class, but in this class, really your drop point was about 7 to 8 where you hit a cliff. And I don't want to say a cliff, but there's then the next tier is in, and I think it's a little bit of a bigger gap.
Mm-hmm.
And they've talked about before they made that trade when Adams and Fortin talked that they thought they had a group of players in that spot where they could get somebody they liked, and it ended up being that way. Now, admittedly, the guy that I wanted, Zeve Buium, was still there at 11, so that was a little bit frustrating in the moment. But I mean, it is what it is, and they ended up moving that second round pick for the guy one of their second round picks for the guy they got. But yeah, I mean, I make that trade every day of the week. I had no issue at all. I understand there's some people, why would you do it before the draft? I don't know what's there, but he could have went and did it with somebody else. So if you don't take it in the moment, he's calling the next team does it. And then it's like, oh, why didn't you do that? Like, it's so yeah, take it. I thought it was weird for San Jose to move up 3 picks, and they didn't move they didn't move off of 11 either. But again, for them, they don't know who's going to be there. So that's kind of odd. Like, who are you trying to go get at 11? I thought maybe they were trying to go from 14 to 11 and then jump again. Maybe they were, and they just couldn't. But yeah, I thought it was a good deal.
So again, I was following the draft, watching it, and also following it live on Twitter. And I am certainly not going to sit here and pretend that I know pretty much anything about these prospects, because I positively do not. I rely on information that I read, people that I talk to, people like yourself included. And that's how I kind of form opinions on these people. They're not first-hand opinions from me. But what I did see a lot of was Sam Dickinson and then Zeve Buium right after going. They ended up going 11 and 12, and there were a lot of people saying that these guys would have been outstanding fits in the Sabres organization, and that one or both of them were going to be expected to be gone before the Sabres would pick at 11. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, they were both there, and both guys go 11 and 12, and that kind of pissed off a lot of fans. And I even seen reaction from a few media members. I don't want to say pissed off. That would be a little bit of overkill saying that when it comes to media people covering the team, but certainly surprised. Were you surprised that both, if the Sabres didn't make this trade and they're on the clock at 11, that both Dickinson and Buium were both there?
No, I would not have expected that. Dickinson, I think I'm more surprised.
Okay.
Because he was a late riser. And even Bob McKenzie's prospect rankings, when they come out, are pretty good. And they're right around where guys go. And I think he had Dickinson 6th. So to have him slide to 11 seemed like a little bit of a surprise. I mean, the kid that went 3rd overall was even a surprise. I mean, the kid himself was shocked that he was picked then. So I think that kind of maybe scrambled some things a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Look, if the Sabres held 11, there's nothing to say that they wouldn't have took the guy they took. I think they probably would have taken the guy that they took, to be perfectly honest, from what I know. So, sure. In the moment, those are guys you wanted, and but I think a lot of teams say we didn't know put the guy we wanted anyways. But from people I've talked to, from what I know, I legitimately think it was 11 or 14. This was the player they were going to take.
All right, let's do this. We're going to take a real quick break, come back on the other side. I'm going to talk about the player that the Sabres did take. We're going to talk about the trade that they did make. Very strong reactions from a lot of people on the trade. Obviously, I want to get your thoughts on that, and then we'll spend a few minutes kind of setting up this week and maybe some of what you anticipate may happen. So we'll take a real quick break, come back, and then we'll do that. All right, I am back here with my buddy Chad DeDominicis talking some hockey today. All right, so the Sabres trade down. They're on the clock at 14. Think that there may be a trade coming, that maybe this is part of a package for, this may be a prospect for a veteran or whatever. Don't happen, and I'm making the pick. It's Costa Helenis, a forward from Finland. Mm-hmm. And again, Chad, I got to emphasize this. I don't know nothing about the dude except for what I've seen with the highlights and, read since then. So not going to try to front there. But people were exploding on social media. Hated the pick. I don't know if necessarily they hated the player. I think maybe they hated the fact that the Sabres didn't make a trade.
Well, I think that's it. They hated the fact that they made a pick.
And that they took yet another skilled, but not a very big forward to add to this mix. What were your thoughts? You don't agree with that. What are your thoughts? What is your take on the Sabres selection of Costa Helenis at 14?
So here's the thing. Like the small thing, I've seen that a few times. Like the Sabres, they picked another small forward.
Mm-hmm.
He just turned 18 years old in May. He's 5'11". If he shows up to Amex training camp at 6'1", is he no longer a small forward? It's a kid. It's still a kid, and he's almost 6 foot already. He could show up to development camp tomorrow and be 6 foot. You know what I mean? It's like that. Like if he's 5'9", okay, fine. But come on, he's not small. Maybe like weight size, he's small, but again, it's an 18-year-old kid. Like he'll grow into his body. Like it's okay. So that part is we'll set that aside. I don't think it's small forward thing at all. The other thing here is he has skill in his game, but he's more of a two-way player. Kind of in the sense of what Benson was coming out, where a lot of people would tell you, yes, he's got the offensive upside. He's got that skill. Don't get me wrong. But his defense is good. And we've seen how good it was because he could step right into the NHL, the 13th overall pick at 18 years old, and be good. So I mean, we saw that. And I think Hellenius has a little bit of that same feature in him. Now, I don't think it's to that level. I still think Benson is going to be a better player at the end of the day, is a higher ceiling. But I think that I think here is more of this is your down the road third line center on this team. He's not going to go compete with Thompson, not going to compete with Cousins. I think if what he is if Krebs fails, he's the guy who slides in there. And he's not that far away. There's a very good chance that he's in Rochester next year. Then the year after that could be in the NHL. I think he thinks that. I think his camp thinks that. And I think the Sabres think that. And I think that is what we may see unfold next season. We'll see how development camp goes and all of that throughout the summer. But I think that's a realistic possibility that he plays in Rochester next season.
Do you think that maybe taking him in the first round, and let's say you're right, and let's not put him in the NHL this year. Let's say he plays a season in Rochester, and let's say he's here a year from now, 15 months from now, whatever it may be. Do you think that might alter Kevyn Adams and the organizational, the thinking of, all right, we know we need a third line center, and we're going to have to get one this summer, whether that's, if it's not going to be Krebs, whether it's going to be via trade or whether they're going to throw some money at a free agent. But because you drafted Hellenius and you might think 2 years down the road, this is going to be our third line center, that might affect what they're trying to do starting today when people are watching or listening, is in terms of who they may get to either compete with Krebs as that third center, or maybe Krebs is the fourth center, however it ends up working out. Who knows? Maybe Krebs ends up getting traded. We don't know.
Yeah.
But do you think that maybe that third center that they're attempting to get, having Tage and having Dylan Cousins locked in, and a guy who probably might only be a year away, that might have, they're not going to be looking to give a long contract to whatever third line center that they might be fishing for right now?
No, I don't think that impacts anything.
No,
I think they are solely focused on making the playoffs this season. Nothing else in their prospect pool matters. They'll figure that out when the time comes. Their focus is on being a playoff team this year. Everything else is secondary. So I don't think who they pick affects that. I think if you want to say what it affects is players in their pool. I think it makes Matt Savoy possible to be moved, more likely. I think it makes Noah Ostlund potentially more likely to be moved. And I don't throw Yuri Kulik in there because I think it's very unlikely that he would be moved. I think they really like him, and I think that I would anticipate he's on the team next year in a lower role. I'm not saying he's going to be a prominent player, but I think he's on the roster next year. But I think Savoy and Ostlund in particular, with the selection of Hellenius, now move into the focus of the two prospects that they could move to get a player to help them now.
So Friday night, they trade back on Thursday. They make a pick on Friday. They don't make a trade. It's a player. And again, I think fans, generally speaking, hated the making the pick more than hating the player that they picked. You know what I mean? Because
100%.
there are a lot of people hoping for a trade, and that first round pick, and yet another first round prospect into a pool that's never ending a pipeline. So I get that. All right.
I will say nobody traded one of their picks. A lot of teams wanted to.
Right.
Nobody did. So I kept trying to warn people, this year, that first round pick did not have as much value as people thought because of the class. A lot of people trying to move their picks. Nobody did.
Right. That's a good point to make. All right. So now we get into Saturday. Again, I'm at Nickel City Comics Con or whatever it was, and you are chilling out in Ellicottville, getting rained out playing golf, and the Sabres make a trade. They're like, all right, here we go. They got that second round pick, extra second round pick. They flip it. They get a trade, and they trade for Beckmanstein. And again, I keep sounding like a broken record here. He's not a prospect. He's been in the league, but I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like I can give you a lot of information or thoughts or takes, Beck Malenstyn, I certainly
Yeah.
can. From everything I've seen, a decent bottom six guy, likely a fourth liner, a good penalty kill guy, a guy who's going to hit, yada, yada, yada. Okay, a couple parts here. A, your thoughts on the trade. B, did the Sabres overpay? Because a lot of the complaining that I saw where there were other second round picks that were moved for players that were better to significantly better than Beck Malenstyn. And the last part, that's kind of almost a rhetorical question. I was going to ask you, are you surprised by the negative reaction in the moment from fans? Which I think that would be a foregone conclusion because you're trade. We've been hearing about it for weeks, and the Sabres finally pulled the trigger on a trade, and it's for Beck Malenstyn. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it was surprising. Surprising in the sense that I think for me more because leading up to that, right after the Dubois trade happened, I started to hear some stuff about the Capitals and the Sabres, and it did go around a little bit, and I thought it was a different player thereafter than the one they got. So that surprised me in that sense. It's also surprised me because I just didn't have him on my radar at all. And even Washington, I think their GM said today they had no plans to move him, but Buffalo made him an offer they couldn't refuse, so they made the move there. And that gets back to I certainly think it was an overpayment. I don't think that getting the player is horrible. I think the price they paid for it on terms of value was pretty bad. So I think that's my main issue. The player itself, look, I haven't watched a ton of Beck Malenstyn either. After this week, my plans to kind of, go watch, believe it or not, I do watch the games. I plan to go watch him a couple of his games in Washington and kind of just get refreshed on his game and see, anything I'm missing because the numbers behind him, at least in the public sphere, they're not great. I know they brought him in here to be a defensive guy. His defensive numbers are not good. Now, it's worth noting that in the entirety of the league, he and Nick Dowd received the heaviest defensive usage in the entire league. So it was all defense for them. Their job was to play defense, and they received some of the heaviest defensive minutes in the entire league. So that's something to take into consideration. So that could play into some of the numbers being poorer, but Dowd's numbers are actually pretty good defensively. So it's kind of I just wonder. In watching him last year in the AHL playoffs against the Amerks, they played Hershey in the conference finals, and Malenstyn was a menace. That entire team it's a bunch of veterans that just go around and just crush people. And they're back-to-back Calder Cup champions for a reason. But Malenstyn was a menace in that series. And now remember, Seth Appert's on the Sabres coaching staff, so I think he saw that, and I think some of the scouts like the player, and I think that's the kind of guy they're looking for. Bass hits. Beyond that, I have questions about how good of a defensive player is. I have questions about how good of a penalty killer he is. Because his penalty kill numbers, admittedly, are difficult to track in instances, but they don't look great.
Right.
So again, I have some questions on that too, but we'll see. If you're somebody who's unlike me who thinks I think Gergenson's a good player, but this is your Gergenson's upgrade, probably. And I don't think they got a better player here, if I'm being perfectly honest. But you don't want Gergensons, you want somebody different. You got somebody different, and sometimes it's be careful what you wish for, kind of thing.
I was gonna say different does not always equate to better. So in actual Sabres team news, besides the Skinner buyout becoming official over the weekend on Sunday, they've made qualifying offers. Krebs, Malenstyn, Yoki Haru, UPL. No surprises with any of this. Did not qualify Jacob Bryson, which doesn't automatically mean or Bryson that he's gone. That's not
correct.
That's not automatic. But going back to Malenstyn, because of all the comments that I was monitoring on Saturday when the trade went down, one of the funniest, but yet also, it was funny, but it's not entirely inaccurate, is somebody called him Beck, and then with quotations in the middle. It said, Beck, I have no trade clause in my contract. Malenstyn is a Buffalo Sabre, meaning he didn't have shit to say about it. He was not going to control getting traded. do you think that maybe the average fan right now, and maybe even some people who might talk about the team, cover the team, write about the team, whatever, are underestimating a little bit the fact that pretty much nobody, I don't say nobody, but almost nobody wants to willingly come to Buffalo, whether it's free agency, whether it's having a big or even a limited no trade, like a list of teams, because a lot of people don't understand this, but hockey players, a lot of them in their contracts have at least some form of no trade.
Yeah.
But like, it's hard and I took some shit. I kind of defended Kevyn Adams on social media a little bit this week. I said, in all fairness to him, I think he's playing against a stacked deck because the player pool that he's got to draw from in terms of trades or trying to sign don't want to come here. And that's kind of his fault as well. But
Sure,
do you feel like maybe the average fan, they kind of underestimate a little bit the fact the job's kind of hard when nobody want to come here? Do you agree with that?
Yes. I think it makes his job more difficult. So I think there's two parts to this for me. It makes his job more difficult. Understandably, got it. But your job is to close on trades. And at the end of the day, if you can't do that, then I got to find somebody else who can.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the circumstances you work within. Got it. So I completely appreciate that. But still, it's your job. This year, like he pulled out last year. Like I tried. This is all I could do. And the cap situation wasn't great for a lot of teams. It didn't go up, and I understood that. And I kind of gave him some like, all right, well, that's the way it is. Some people wouldn't waive. He thought he had some deals. Nobody really made moves because the cap. That doesn't apply this.
Adams was pretty open, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Chad, he was pretty open this week about talking about trying to make trades and it not happening. I mean, usually you're a little bit more coy about when you're trying to make trades. You almost feel like you're behind the scene. He was really open about it, wasn't he?
He probably shouldn't have been, to be honest. He probably should have kept that in his back pocket. That probably wasn't the best thing to put out there. But I think part of that could be his frustration, though, is that he's trying to get things done and he can't, for whatever reason. So that's one side of it. You still got to be able to close it at the end of the day. The other side of it, in terms of around the league, I think, as I said, that he's dealing with some issues here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's also a little bit overstated at times. And I think that there's things playing into it that people are saying or thinking that aren't entirely true. Like, I'll take Marty Natchez for an example. This isn't anything new. I tweeted out before I came onto your show. There was a report from one of the big guys, I think it was LeBron, that the Sabres were interested. The Sabres had a first round pick on the table for Natchez. Completely untrue. They really were not entirely that interested in that player. And I think a lot of people thought when that didn't happen is, because he's not going to come to Buffalo, he's not going to sign a contract. So, it's another guy who didn't want to come here. Not the case. That was not the guy they were interested in Carolina. It was overhyped, I think, by Carolina putting things out there, because 15 minutes after LeBron's report was a report that, the New Jersey Devils want to put their 10th overall pick out on the board for Natchez. And again, didn't happen. He's still on that team. And he probably is going to stay there now with Gensel leaving. And I think like a guy like Nick Ehlers, who's been out there, I don't think the no trade clause is an issue there. No trade clause for John Marino. He was with Lindy Ruff last year in New Jersey. Didn't come here. Assumption was, he probably wouldn't waive. There's a reason he didn't come here, but that wasn't it. So I just think it gets a little bit overinflated. While he's still dealing with a stacked deck, like you said, I think that there's a point now where, because it's happened to him a few times where no trades have stopped him, that I think we're leaning too much the other way in reality. And we'll see tomorrow in free agency, because there could be some things happen that surprise people. But I think we could completely change this narrative. But we'll have to see if some of those things get across the finish line.
Yeah, and I want to remind people too, we're recording this Sunday. So as of right now, as we're recording, it's roughly 9:30 or so on Sunday night. So you might be waking up and catching us later in the morning or afternoon, and maybe the Sabres have done something big.
Yeah, right.
At all.
Right.
At that point, you know what's funny? I was going to, like, in my notes, I have like a little bit of an outline that I wanted to make sure that I touched up on with you. And one of them was going to be Pat Kane, because we sat at Imperial Pizza last year. You were my guest on a live show at Imperial Pizza, and we talked about Kane. And at the time, dude had a lot to prove. You know, he was coming off the surgery and stuff. He ended up, of course, signing with Detroit. And most people were not, really optimistic about how he was going to look, and understandably so, because again, he had a lot to prove. But he did prove that, and he proved to be still a good player.
Yep.
He signed on Sunday, or he's about to sign. It's not official as we record this anyway, but it looks like he's going to be back in Detroit for another year. So scratch the whole, is Pat Kane to the Sabres when he brought the head coach any kind of reality. I'm a little surprised, though, that he's not even going to test free agency, that it appears he's going back to Detroit, because I would have thought there would have been some pretty keen interest in him on the open market.
He knows what's there. Look,
yeah,
everybody knows what's there. There's I know the market doesn't open yet.
They know by now, though, right?
Look, 12:02 tomorrow, it's gonna flood in. Whoa, how did these 15 guys already sign? It's because of, let's say, I don't know, 25 free agents. 13 of them know where they're going tomorrow. It's already done. Locked
Just
in.
like
We
football,
already
sure.
know Pesci. Pesci is going to New Jersey. How? How do they know that? Well, he's not supposed to be a free agent. They can't even talk to him.
Right. What is all right, so let me ask you this as we wind down here. The first line is pretty, if you're going to put Paterka on the first line, that first line is pretty sad. You got Cousins, you got Quinn. Let's just, for the sake of discussion, let's put for now Benson there, okay? Even though they could get a winger and Benson would be on the third line, but let's just put him there for now. And let's say for now that fourth line ultimately ends up being Krebs, Greenway, and the new guy Malenstyn. Let's just, for shits and giggles, that's the fourth line. Basically, they're putting a third line together, and let's give Kulik the nod and say that he's going to make the roster. So you're probably looking at two forwards that they're going to look to add. A third line center and like I said, a winger who maybe he's the second or third, top, bottom six, top nine, whatever you want to call it. What is your realistic, at least somewhat realistic right now? You're kind of like, if you're a Sabres fan and you're covering the team, but whether it's a trade target or it's a free agent target, somebody who think is at least remotely realistically a possibility for the Sabres to lock in on starting here on Monday.
Somebody I've thought about, and to be very clear, I have no inside info on this. I do not know if they're interested. I do not even know if it's real. But I'm putting pieces of the puzzle together on this one. And that's Tyler Toffoli. So for a few reasons. One, he played for Lindy Ruff last year in New Jersey. If he liked playing for Ruff and if that went well, okay, there's one check. Two, we've heard a lot of chatter about these top free agents, and he's one of them. But there's not a lot of chatter on him. And it's interesting because Kevyn Adams is a general manager that kind of works in the dark, mostly not a lot gets out, especially about guys he acquires. I mean, Beck Malenstyn, the perfect example. Nobody in the world talked about Beck Malenstyn, and here he is.
Right.
So I think things being quiet on that also fits the Sabres, and the Sabres check. And the third thing is he's a guy that they can take $31 million of cap space and just throw a ton of money at him in a short-term deal and say, here, take my money. And he's then probably your second line winger. He has the ability, he can still score a lot of goals in this league. He can play on the power play. I don't think he has the speed he used to have, but his type of game, he doesn't need that. He's still a finisher and an efficient player. So again, I don't have any insight. I'm going more off a gut and more puzzle piecing together things here, but he's somebody that I'm interested to see what happens with him tomorrow.
Is Tavares a pipe dream?
Yeah, no, he's not leaving Toronto.
Yeah, don't think so.
No.
If they can find a good third line center and say you played him with Benson and Kulik, you feel like that could be an interesting third line.
Chandler Stevenson is somebody that I know Lance Lasowski has mentioned that he reported or he said in his podcast, I think it was, that he's high in the list. And I believe him. I don't love it. Especially if he's going to be a center. I don't think he's a center anymore. I think he's more of a winger. But I don't think he's the winger that they need in terms of like a top line, top six winger. That doesn't really fit. There's some sure signs of decline there, and then I also have some anxiety about taking him out of Vegas's system into Buffalo's. Like, there's a lot of I've seen this movie before with Chandler Stevenson that makes me nervous, and then the money he would get, the contract. So this is one of the few times I'm hoping Lance is wrong on that, because it would, I
Last topic
would
here.
love that.
Last topic before I let you go. We kind of hit on this, or at least hinted at this a little bit earlier too. Do you feel at this point Kevyn Adams is I don't want to say he's not coaching for his job, but he's GMing for his job this summer? Like, things, he's got to get it right this summer. He didn't do enough, it appears now. And it's easy to have the power of hindsight a year later, but last summer, not good enough. This was a team that almost made the playoffs 2 years ago. Doesn't make the playoffs right now. They're buying out Jeff Skinner. I think maybe Lindy Ruff being the head coach, it could be a great hockey move, but I think also in the PR department, which is not nothing, I think that buys you a little bit of goodwill. Maybe that buys you a little bit of time too. But I feel like if this year doesn't work out, if this team doesn't make the playoffs, or at least they're not there, dude, really late in the season, fighting for a playoff spot, that this could be Kevyn Adams is on really thin ice type situation. Do you what's your gut tell you about that?
Yeah. Yes. 100%. Playoffs or bust, essentially. Within reason. I mean, if he misses by a point and Tage and Darlene miss 45 games, then fine. He probably survives one more year. He gets one more year with Lindy's last year of his contract, if that type of scenario unfolded. But if they miss, then I think he's in serious trouble. And I just really hope that doesn't happen, because I want this front office to succeed, because I think they have some really smart people there.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be a shame to start over, because I think they have a really good front office in place. And it's not just the analytics guys. I think over like the scouting staff, I think Jason Carmanos is an excellent associate general manager who I think is going to be GM in this league one day. So I hope it works out for them. And for me, like I'm not in the mood to start over again. And I mean, I don't think it could be a full tear it down, rebuild, restart. But then it's a new general managing staff. It's a new They get their guys in here. Some of those guys goes out, and then it's okay. How long do we got to play this game for? And then we're at 14, 15, 16. So I hope it comes together for them this year. Sitting here right now, like we say, it's not promising, as we talked about throughout this 45 minutes. There's a lot of holes to fill here. I hope it breaks for him the right way.
You get a sense too that he's feeling that pressure. Like I said, I was a little bit taken back almost by the fact that he was openly talking about, like, oh, look, it was almost, he didn't say this, but almost to me, watching him in action in his press conference a couple of days ago, it almost felt like he was saying, hey, look, man, I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm trying to make trades right here. People don't want to play ball with us. Kind of like almost like a frustration coming from the general manager. That's the sense I got anyway.
I think that's fair. And because I think he knows the enormity of the situation. And I think he wants to win. And I think he wants to win for this team. He wants to win for this city.
Mm-hmm.
Kevyn's a very passionate guy, from what I understand, about his job. And I think I think he does it right. It's not all on him. It's not, of course, he approves all the decisions. But one of the things I like from what I know about his management style is he takes a lot of input from the smart people he has around him, his scouting staff, his numbers guys, Carmanos, Fortin now, who got elevated. It's really an ultimate team effort there. It's not just Adams like just doing what he wants and, okay, you think this? Well, too bad. I want the guy. I'm going to go do it. He takes that input in, he makes, an informed decision. And that's if I was in that role, that's how I would do it too.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of why, I mesh, and I hope that works out. I hope that style works out, because I think if they brought in somebody else, it wouldn't be that same style. Because I think at that point, then I think the NHL might step in and go, okay, we're going to get a veteran guy in there, or you're going to put one in there, Terry. That's what you're doing.
Tell people what you got coming down the chute here. You, Anthony, and staff over at Expected Buffalo. Again, free agency starts like now, today, and things like that. So what do you guys got coming down the chute? What do you got planned with your show? in your site?
Oh man. Hopefully a busy next couple of days. Hopefully not just sitting around here and we're just twiddling our thumbs and be like, well, they still could do this kind of articles. So hopefully some things to go over, but we'll be on top of it. I know that Eddie has some things in the pipeline. I checked before we started that he's working on Malenstyn stuff too. Austin, who's done a great job doing the draft, and all of our draft content specifically was free this year for everybody to check it out. He does have a full wrap on the Sabres picks that went out this morning. I want to. So definitely check that out because it's not only on the first round pick. Like the dude knows guys that were picked like in depth in the 7th round. So check that out because he will definitely give you a good feel of what they did and how they did in this draft. And then I have my night before free agency podcast I'm going to put together as soon as we hang up here. So that'll hit tomorrow too. So it's going to be a fun few days. It'll be exhausting. Not a lot of sleep next 3-4 days leading to the 4th of July, but then after that, it calms down. So it's time to it can refresh at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And everyone, make sure you're following Chad on Twitter at CMD DeDominicis. And of course, check out Expected Buffalo. Always a pleasure having you on, buddy.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. And like I said, I'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. We're going to talk some Bills camp storylines and hopefully a recap of some of what happened with the Buffalo Sabres on Monday. Talk to you then.